Welcome to another edition of the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty, and joining me this week is Jeff D.
Hi, folks.
Who was supposed to be on last week, but you got sick.
I got sick, and Tracy took up the slack for me, and she was kind enough to offer me an opportunity to appear in her place on this show. So thanks, Tracy.
So we shuffled the calendar a little bit. I'm sure that confused somebody, but we're going to carry on and enjoy ourselves. We are live. Today is Sunday, January 21st, 2007. This is the Atheist Community of Austin, is the sponsor of this program. The ACA is a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state, and has weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road. That's every Sunday except for the first Sunday of the month, when we host a lecture series at the Austin History Center located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. Anybody's welcome to come to either of those events as well. The purpose of the program allows atheists in Austin the chance to speak to the public and for the public to address and ask questions about atheism, to discuss questions of religion, current events, problems, anything along those lines. Allows us to express our opinions and hopefully settle some confusion and misunderstanding, as atheism is a viewpoint that's quite often misrepresented. Sometimes we'll have debates, and we're open to answering all kinds of questions, but there are a lot of questions that we get asked over and over again, and in that case, we may not answer the same question multiple times in the same show, and we'll direct you to the frequently asked questions portion of the ACA's website, which you can see on the bottom of your screen is www.atheist-community.org. The audio portion of this program is available on the internet, and now the video portion is also available via Google Video. Woo-hoo. So if you go to atheist-experience.com, where you would normally go to download the podcast or the MP3 or the open source version of MP3, there's also a link there that says video, and it'll direct you to Google Video, and I think we've got 8 or 10 episodes up. Don Baker, who's the co-host and also the vice president of the ACA, has been working really hard, along with help from Stephen Elliott, Joe Rhodes, who are the producers of the show, who've been around way longer than I have, and make sure that a lot of this stuff gets done. And some feedback from some other tech-savvy members. We've got it up and running, and you can watch us if you want to. If you prefer just to listen, I can understand that too. The audio is still available. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. That's Prophets, and is hosted by Jeff D. It's co-hosted by Dennis Lubay. Features Russell Glasser and myself. We will be live again this coming Saturday, the 27th. That's 2 p.m. Central. We do not take phone calls live during that program like we do on this one, but we do run a chat service in conjunction with the show so that people who are listening live can interact, and we get a lot of good feedback from them that way. And if you have any feedback, questions, criticisms, concerns about either of the programs, or just want to talk to the ACA or any of us about anything, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. And that goes to myself, all the co-hosts, and everybody involved in the show. We can't promise to answer every email, especially now that we're being broadcast audio and video to the world. But we'll do what we can to answer some of them, and we definitely read all of them. And sometimes we'll get some good feedback on how to change things and correct things on the program if we've made mistakes, because we're only human and we're liable to missay something at least once a week, I'm sure. We'll be happy to correct that and move on. In addition to the Sunday morning meetings and lectures, the ACA also hosts a number of social events throughout the week, including Atheist Happy Hour Thursdays. That's at Ninfa's Mexican Restaurant on Anderson near 183 and I-35. That's at 7:30. Anybody who wants to come down and enjoy a dinner, meet some of the people in the ACA who are behind the scenes or are not involved in the program, you're all welcome to come down. As with all of our events, they're open to any atheist or atheist-friendly people. You don't have to be a member, and as long as you're not coming down to preach, proselytize, or provoke, you're more than welcome to come down. We've had people of different faiths come down to the after-show dinner, which I'll mention in a moment, and even have reasonable discussions and debates. That's not a problem. As long as everybody can remain civil and enjoy their meal and have a good time, then we're kind of an open group. The Sunday morning meeting that's currently being held at Romeo's is going to be moving to Ventana del Sol on February 11th. February 11th will also be the 10th anniversary celebration for the ACA. On February 10th of 1997, we were officially incorporated as a nonprofit organization. We'll be celebrating that. We'll have some of the original founding members of the ACA come in to speak and generally just have a gathering. So all ACA members in the area, current and past, are welcome to come down to Ventana del Sol and join us for that. We'd love to hear from you and like to pack that place and see how many people we can get in there and have good discussions about both the past history of the ACA and the things that we're going to be looking forward. I'll be giving a State of the ACA address, talking about the building committee and our efforts towards getting a new building, and a few other things. I've already mentioned the email, so I don't think that there's any other pressing announcements. We've got, Darwin Day is coming up.
Darwin Day is coming up.
And that's also, that's the February 10th weekend.
I think it's the 12th.
Is it February 12th? So it'd be
I believe so.
The Monday after that.
www.darwinday.org, I believe, is the website for Darwin Day.
And as a reminder, since they've put it up on the screen, for anybody who wants to join us after the show, everybody involved tends to get together to go to dinner. We're currently going to Threadgill's, 301 West Riverside. The show's on until 6 p.m. We normally get down there about 6:30, maybe 6:45 at the outside, and that also is open under the same restrictions as the other events. So come on down and join us there. And I guess you've got some stuff we wanted to talk about.
I've got some stuff that I brought in to talk about today, Matt. You know, we're often asked, okay, well, all this God stuff aside, what do atheists stand for? What are we in favor of? And what do we do, good for our society? What makes us worthy contributing members of the culture? And so I thought I would address that. But when I started thinking about this topic, it occurred to me that there's an obstacle that I want to talk about. Atheists, by various polls, represent anywhere from 7 to 15% of Americans. And that's a big whopping group. That is more than Jews in American culture by percentage. And so we represent a great big potential force for good. Now, the one thing though is that atheism is not a political movement, and it's not possible to say all atheists are in favor of this issue or that issue. I know in this very room, in the audience, we have at least 2 different diametrically opposed political adherents, because atheism in general is not directly connected with any political party or particular agenda, and in particular, the ACA is not. We are a nonpartisan organization. Still, all atheists that I know have deep interests in any of a number of social issues, be it education, or separation of church and state, or poverty, or civil rights. We are, depending on which one of us you ask, we are big supporters of various issues. But the problem that I wanted to talk about is the way that it seems to me, from having paid attention to this for a while, the way that the Christian left, I guess I should say Christianity in general, but the Christian left in particular, since it's now becoming more politically active, opposes the involvement of atheists in social issues. And I guess I will focus on the Christian left here because that's where my research is. And plus, we talk about how the Christian right is opposed to atheists and our involvement in anything all the freaking time. This is a new issue and a place where I think it's possible that there could be a solution, because the Christian right is pretty much totally above board about their belief that their God has a big issue with us and how there must be something bad or wrong with us for not being members of their organizations. Whereas on the Christian left, you will hear a lot of lip service about the rights of non-Christians, about how respect ought to be offered to non-Christians. And yet, the problem that I perceive is that if you read between the lines, people on the Christian left are just as prejudiced against those who don't agree with their religion as people on the religious right. And I will offer some examples. Now, I will repeat, the ACA itself is not a politically partisan organization. We are interested in various issues, but we are not tied to any particular party. But in my examples, I'm going to be talking about the Democratic Party because that is where the religious left has become very, very active recently. These are just examples, though, and what I have to say is valid no matter which particular party we're talking about. Jim Wallace is one of the main spokesmen for an effort to Christianize the Democratic Party. And when I started doing my research, it took me about 30 seconds browsing the internet to come up with these quotes. He says, "I hope the Democrats can really find a new moral vocabulary and change not just language, but the content of some of their positions to speak, to frame, and to envision their agenda in a way that is shaped by faith and values." Now, values are fine. Everybody has values, whether they're, no matter what religion or non-religion they are. But when Jim Wallace suggests that the Democratic Party's agenda should be shaped by faith, he's basically saying that atheists, people that don't operate from the standpoint of faith, don't really have what it takes to contribute to that party's agenda. And that's really troubling for folks like us. He also says, you don't win by saying, I'm religious, so my position should prevail, or God spoke to me and gave me the fix for Social Security. No, you say, I'm motivated by faith, here's why. You don't have to be apologetic about that. Then you have to persuade your fellow citizens that this is the best thing for the common good, for all of us, not just for religious people, but for all of us. I think that is even more clear. He's suggesting that the best thing for atheists is for political parties to be driven by religious faith. And we just can't possibly agree with that. Saying that excludes any possibility for atheists having positions of leadership in that party. Now, that's all stuff I dug up some time ago. Recently, there was a speech by Barack Obama that sent a lot of my fellow atheists into a tizzy because of some of the things that he said about his religious background and motivations. So I did a bunch of research on that, and I went and dug up the speech, and I also found a bunch of information on Barack Obama. Did I say that wrong? Barack Obama himself. Not the least interesting of which is that his mother was an atheist. Did you know this?
I did not know that.
Barack Obama's mother was an atheist, and according to Barack, his father, who was a Muslim at the time he married his mother, after they separated, his father became an atheist, according to Barack. Now, there's this crazy document going around the internet circulated by right-wing lunatics trying to attack Barack Obama, claiming that he is some kind of stealth Muslim, which is just freaking ridiculous. So please don't call in wanting to talk about that. It's just bullshit. But what I want to talk about is this speech. Now, I found, actually, in researching this, I found atheists who had a really severe problem with some of the stuff that he said, and I found other atheists who said, come on, it's not so bad. And I have to say, after having actually read it, I fall into the, come on, it's not all that bad category, because really, it's the most level-headed, reasonable, and tolerant speech you could expect from a man who believes he has an invisible friend living in the sky who watches over him and wants good things to happen for him, and oh, by the way, who authored the list of rules about what the difference is between right and wrong. all that taken into consideration, it's really pretty good. It's a speech that he gave before an organization, the name of which I should have written down and I didn't. But it was apparently a group of people wanting to bring religion more into a role in progressive politics and not make big mistakes while doing it. And his speech is much about the rights of non-believers and how you should listen to them and so on and so forth. But I'm sad to say that even in his speech, on the one hand, he'll say something that sounds just fine, and then he'll turn around and say other stuff that, from the perspective of atheists, sounds like he's championing for non-believers to be excluded in various ways.
Do you think, and this may be common among politicians, this kind of doublespeak, where it maybe even be planned doublespeak, where they're going to say something muddy one direction and something muddy the other direction so that they can appeal to as many people as possible and hope that they're not too much in either direction.
And you're wondering if it was just vague, and that's why I'm getting the impression I'm getting?
Yeah.
It's weird, no, because he's not vague. Well, he'll say things like, faith doesn't mean that you don't have doubts. Now, that's his statement. I'm not suggesting that he's right or that describes how everybody else approaches faith. But, I mean, that's a reasonable position. I mean, atheists hearing that coming from a Christian go, oh, well, we thought it did mean that you didn't have any doubts, and that's why we were so concerned that you were nuts. And so hearing him say that sounds like a good thing, right? On the other hand, he'll turn around and say, he was talking about his particular religious journey. He was himself an atheist, according to him, until his 20s when he joined this church. And speaking of the experience, he says, you need to come to church in the first place precisely because you are first of this world, not apart from it. You need to embrace Christ precisely because you have sins to wash away, because you are human and need an ally in this difficult journey. Well, that doesn't sound like a statement coming from someone who recognizes that faith doesn't mean you don't have doubts. That sounds like a very clear statement that all people have sins that they need washed away and need a supernatural ally that happens to be his God. And that they all need to come to this church. Now, he could have been, my first reaction was, oh, well, what if he's just talking to an audience of other Christians? Right? And so in that context, he might mean that. But, even if you're talking to, if Barack Obama was talking to other Christians, if he really means it when he says that faith doesn't mean that he doesn't have any doubts, he still shouldn't be saying what he just said in such definite terms as if it applied to everybody in all situations. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that may happen is in his first statement where he says faith doesn't mean that you don't have doubts, he may be playing with the word faith.
I think he very likely is. In fact, in my opinion, that's not the definition of faith. But
because
I was just talking about the implications of that from my perspective.
One of the things is you need to determine what you believe. You need some method for distinguishing fact from fantasy, for a way of defining your reality and determining what you believe. And there are degrees of certainty in belief. I'm more certain about some things than I am about others. But the question is, what methodology to use? Well, if you're using reason, logic, evidence, independent confirmation, empirical observation, things like that, that's one way to assess reality. The other way is the way that some of these people have come up with, and they've put this label of faith on it, which basically just means it feels good, so I'm going to believe it. Or so many other people believe it that I'm uncomfortable not believing it, so I'm going to believe it. Or, gee, reallikers, I really hope this is true, so I'm going to believe it. But it's a justification for belief that's not a justification at all. Just like God did it is a non-answer and not an answer when you're talking about the big questions.
Right.
But there's this other definition of faith where it's synonymous with religion.
Right.
And because there's that little ambiguity, you can kind of shuffle the word faith around. So when he says faith doesn't mean you don't have any doubts, he may be implying that just because you happen to have a religious belief that is based on faith doesn't mean you don't ever have doubts. But to go on and say what he said about, everybody needs not everybody, but you
But
need to come to
by
church.
not saying he's not talking about everybody, right?
Right.
Even if he's talking to an audience of other people who share his religion and therefore have gone through the same experience, right? I mean, if he's not careful about the way he speaks, it really sounds like he's making a definitive statement for all people at all times that in agreement with Jim Wallace's statement that faith is this important thing that our political leaders should be motivated by, and that's good even for atheists. It sounds like that kind of thing. Maybe he didn't mean it this way, but if he didn't mean it the way it sounds, then the problem is he ought to watch the way he speaks. In this world today where we have video and audio and text recording of stuff that goes on the internet and everybody's going to hear it, you can't really afford to speak from a perspective that only the people that in your immediate audience are going to understand. And that's part of the problem.
There are additional quotes, and I don't know if you have them there if you're going to get to them, but there are other times when he's talked about faith and its role in politics, and that caused, when I heard him, I was like, I can't get on board.
These are some statements that I pulled out of the one big speech that it was linked from Feringula, the guy that runs that site, was very much against it, and so I just pull out these things that are, I think, indicative of some of the issues. Let me go on. He comes out and says that religious language, that it's wrong for all religious language to be removed from politics. And this is what he says. He says, imagine Lincoln's second inaugural address without reference to the judgments of the Lord. Or Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech without references to all of God's children. I think the Martin Luther King speech is kind of a red herring. He was not a politician. He was a minister and social activist, and it's perfectly appropriate for non-politicians motivated by religion to use religious language in their speeches. I would never occurred to me that anybody could possibly complain about that. So that doesn't really belong. But he brings up Lincoln. He says, their summoning of a higher... Do you have a comment?
I was just going to say he's asking us to imagine those speeches without it.
Right.
I not only have no problem doing it, I have no problem accepting that the speeches could be very much better. I think this is a failure of imagination on the part, or world experience, or broad reading on the part of people like Barack Obama. If you go read something by, for example, Ingersoll, who makes some of the most impassioned pleas for social justice. He was the one, he's responsible for a 40-hour work week almost single-handedly, as far as lobbying type things go. He makes incredibly just beautiful arguments. And there's no appeal to God or supernatural beings or all God's children or anything like that.
I absolutely agree. And I also think this may well, again, be simply Barack Obama thinking that he's talking to a crowd of religious people, and therefore he's going to say this stuff that will whip them all into a frenzy. Well, in a world where, in a nation, where 7 to 15% of the public are atheists, we're out here, we are available to be involved in various political parties and on various social programs, and if you alienate us with this kind of language, it's maybe not surprising that people get the impression that atheists are somehow, uncaring, because we walk up to get involved in any particular issue and immediately run into language like this.
It may just be that they're not, this attempt by Barack and others to appeal to Christians, especially more moderate, reasonable, level-headed Christians, they just don't care about the 7 to 15% of the population because we're largely irrelevant. What other options do we have that have a significant effect?
7 to 15% of the public is not irrelevant.
No, I'm not saying they are. I'm saying they view us as that.
Yeah, I think they may make that mistake. And
like, for example, if Barack were to run for president against a George Bush clone, I would have no choice apart from not voting, but to vote for Barack, regardless of what he said, just because the majority of his positions are going to agree with mine more.
It is true that some of us atheists are able to grit our teeth and just go ahead and be involved. I'm bringing up this issue because we shouldn't have to grit our teeth and force ourselves to get involved in issues or candidates as individuals. Again, the ACA is not politically partisan, does not have a dog in this fight. Talking about what life is like for individual atheists these days. We should not have to grit our teeth and ignore the stuff that's being said that denigrates our lack of religion, by implication every time it's said. We shouldn't have to deal with that. And
I think the whole approach, and I'm sure that this is the broader point that I think you're getting to, is that this whole approach, this whole idea is useless. If there's absolutely no reason, a secular government, the separation of church and state, is something that benefits everybody. True religious freedom, where everybody is allowed to practice on their own, whatever they believe or don't believe, that benefits everybody. And if you were to just say, you know what, we're not going to talk about religion in the political realm, and the government's going to stay out of it. We're not going to be making appeals to faith. We're not going to be doing things that even imply that we're marginalizing portions of the population. You can still get all the same stuff done. Religion is not necessary to do anything. There's no positive benefit from religion that you can't get from secularism.
Right.
Apart from an afterlife, and of course you guys got to prove that first.
We can probably go ahead and put the phone number up there. I'm almost done. If people want to call in. I'm particularly interested, by the way, in talking to socially active and politically active liberal Christians, specifically about this issue, and try to discuss: is there some way we can find to work together? Because it would be really nice if there was. To work together without pissing each other off. Okay, so he says all this stuff about Lincoln, and I think your point is better than the point I was going to make. You're
make it anyway.
Now, you're absolutely right. Their uplifting language does not have to have the word God in it. It's just not true. So here's another line pulled out of his big speech that is great. He says, "I do not believe that religious people have a monopoly on morality." Well, yeah, absolutely right. So his speech is about the religious left getting involved in politics and doing that without making big mistakes. And he says this. So the question is, how do we build on these still tentative partnerships between religious and secular people of goodwill? It's going to take more work, a lot more work than we've done so far. The tensions and the suspicions on each side of the religious divide will have to be squarely addressed. And each side will need to accept some ground rules for collaboration, which I think is a great paragraph, and I totally agree. Unfortunately, in his entire speech, he never once even begins to hint at ground rules for religious people of goodwill to follow when working with secular people. His entire speech is about how, you secular people need to back off, need to tone it down, right? Need to respect religion more. I agree that the tensions on each side need to be addressed. Let's address the tensions on the side of the atheists that are brought about by religious language used by liberal theists. Yeah.
The one statement that he made where he says he doesn't believe that religious people have a monopoly on morality. Of course, I agree. And not to be overly nitpicky, but what difference does that make? Because he's a politician. Questions of morality shouldn't really be a concern. It's not the government's business to be legislating morality. Now, we can talk about ethical behavior, we can talk about laws and how and why they should be implemented, but to even that to me is kind of the bones of a red herring that he's dangling at us right there.
That's a good
by
point,
saying,
too.
"Oh, I don't think religious
Should
people
he have
a
said,
monopoly."
"I don't believe that religious people have a monopoly on ethics"?
I don't want to.
Is there a way to rephrase it to make it work?
Nitpick between the two.
But that's exactly why I'm bringing this up. I think there needs to be a discussion started, at least among liberal Christians, and hopefully involving atheists we are the people out here hearing what you folks have to say and going, "Grr," in reaction to it. There needs to be a discussion of how to tidy up this language so you can say what you mean, but without alienating folks like us. Without, unfortunately, I'm afraid that the truth might be that even liberal Christians really do mean that only Christianity is a valid viewpoint from which to make decisions on political and social issues. I'm afraid that might really be what they mean, but I can't tell, because on the one hand, they'll say things like, these things Barack Obama said, which sound on their face like, well, okay, fine, we have some grounds to discuss, but then they'll turn right around and talk about how essential it is that things be said their way and decided from their perspective.
Maybe instead of saying something along the lines of, "I don't believe that religious people have a monopoly on morality," he could have said something along the lines of, "I don't believe that religious people are the only ones who are concerned with social issues, are the only ones who want to be active in creating a better world for us to live in. I don't believe that religious people are the only ones who care about political actions and movements. I don't believe that religion should be kowtowed to, shown deference to, that we should have a position where everybody else has to respect us and say, well, when he starts talking about faith, we'll just kind of, grit our teeth and wait through it, and then we'll get on to the real meat. Let's just chuck the fat out altogether and start with the meat from the get-go."
Yeah. Of course, that would have been a lot longer.
Yeah, it's so nice to have that pithy little, "I don't believe that all religious people have a monopoly on morality." But
yeah. So anyway, that's the issue that I wanted to bring up, because atheists are starting to get organized, and it's really happening now. I know that people are aware of this spate of books recently where we're also starting to get a little outspoken. We're becoming a more cohesive segment of the population that's raring to go and ready to be involved in stuff. And if only we can get to that point without being shooed away by people who think that because they believe in an invisible man in the sky, they're in a better position to contribute than we are. So that's all I have to say. Do we have a call?
We do have a call on the line. Let's go ahead and take that. Is it Steve?
Yeah.
How you doing, Steve?
Hi, Steve.
I guess I'm a little less likely to grit my teeth at some of these things.
Are you can you tell me, Steve, are you a liberal Christian or?
I'm an atheist. I don't think,
okay.
I agree with everything you're saying in terms of the reality of, you don't need this stuff. You don't need to talk like that. But even the 7 to 15%, 85% thing, I think most people, and I'm not doing this scientifically really, but they really behave. If you look at people's behavior, there's a lot less people who actually decide what their actions are going to be based on faith than they would have you believe.
Right.
And I think when people talk, and I'm not really disagreeing with you, except just in terms of, I don't need to grit my teeth. I don't think Barack Obama is trying to make a Christian nation.
No, I'm
like
sure
some
he's
other
not.
people are.
I'm sure he's not quite in the sense that right-wing fundamentalist conservatives are.
I don't think he is at all. I think he's just. I think when he speaks to the whatever it is, 85%, he's basically got to make him think. This guy's a good guy. That's what everybody has to do. The statistics that say the most reviled people are the atheists, which I agree with you is wrong and we need to change, that pretty much means that if you're going to get elected, you got to at least say something that says, I'm just like most people, quote good people or whatever, and that's all they're doing. Most of them. Now, some of them you can tell are actually, kind of the ones we've been dealing with more already,
right.
And they make me grind my teeth. So I guess I'm just.
I think
we shouldn't be too touchy.
I'm actually pretty much in agreement with Steve on that, because I don't think that the majority of Christians, let's say that 85% of the United States population is Christian. We already know that nowhere near that many actively practice, go to church. I would reckon, because I've been a Christian and known lots of them, many of them don't really spend most of their day concerned about a God or the existence of a God. That their faith and their beliefs don't really play an active role in most of the decisions they make. And yet, when the subject of faith comes up, when the subject of religion comes up, they're more than happy to say that faith plays a role, or a larger role than perhaps it does. Right. And certainly a politician trying to get elected who does share their beliefs is going to say something along those lines.
But let me continue from what I was saying before. You said you don't think Barack Obama wants to turn this into a Christian nation, right? And really, the issue is whether anybody wants to turn it into a Christian state, which is different. I mean, it is on some level fair to say it's a nation full of Christians. When a big whopping percentage of the public are Christian, right? But I don't think he wants to turn it into a Christian nation, or a Christian state. But it does sound what he said and what Jim Wallace says sound an awful lot like they want to turn the political process into a religious process, where it is a default assumption that if you are making your decisions from the standpoint of faith, that is better. Now, you can say, they don't really live like that, or they don't really mean it.
Right.
But right now, there are a lot of these statements being said, and I think it may be that it's merely because there's this big push right now for the religious left to get active, and so they're saying what they think they need to say to get taken seriously. What I'm trying to say is, you religious people do not have to go that far in order to be recognized as valid participants in the process. You just don't. And to say these things that they're saying about the fundamental, essential requirement of faith in being a good citizen, or being a contributing member to the political process, those are dangerous things to say.
I think that when I hear them say that, though, I take it to mean it's fundamental requirement to be an earnest person. It's a fundamental requirement to be acting on behalf of more than just yourself. In other words, the things that and really, I don't think he is advocating excluding people from the process.
No, I don't think he is either. But it sounds an awful lot like he's saying that if you're not religious, then you don't need to be excluded, but you are a second-class citizen.
Well, I guess I don't know that it could be. If that's the case, I am right with you, but I just don't interpret it that way.
I'm not sure he means it. That's the thing. Because at the same time, he'll turn around and say other stuff that sounds a lot more even-handed, right?
And I don't think you're going to find anybody that's got a chance of getting dog catcher who won't say similar things. And I think that if you fly off the handle, I think we got to pick. I don't know how you read between the lines properly, but if we're going to get touchy about what people are saying, we got to pick the ones that we really need to get touchy about. And I guess if it's gritting the teeth, I mean, cut some slack for the kind of BS mumbo jumbo that people have to say.
As I said, I know a lot of atheists who go ahead and be involved in spite of all this. Right? We just shouldn't have to.
Right.
I don't think I'm flying off the handle. I'm bringing up an issue that I think is valid.
I didn't mean you were flying off the handle, but it's reacting quite specifically to some comments you hear people making, and I think I don't know where we're going to get with
if
that.
If it wasn't for the fact that Barack Obama's entire speech is about how there is tension between the secular world and the religious, secular people and religious people, and work needs to be done to address that tension, right? If it wasn't for the fact that his speech was about that, I probably wouldn't be talking about this here. I think he's absolutely right. I didn't make that up. It's just that is from both sides work needs to be done.
Yeah.
From both sides.
It was about that and to the 85%, though, I think. And it basically, I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong. He could be the next, Bob Jones University,
If it's right to not put up the Ten Commandments on a courthouse lawn because it could offend Hindus, right? Because the first commandment is no other gods before me, and they got bunches, right?
Right.
Then it's just as right to raise concerns about political language that offends atheists.
Well, there's a
lot less Hindus than there are us. I mean,
I think it's right. I just don't think it's very practical.
Oh no! From a practical standpoint, I'm stuck choosing between the lesser of two evils all the time.
Right.
That's a given.
That's no reason not to talk about it.
No reason not to also mention that things could be different and better.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with that too.
So
anyway, thanks for letting me call.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks very much for your call, Steve. I mean, I think if I get the gist of what Steve was saying is let's not let the existing tensions stop us from being involved. And I'm sorry if I hinted that they did or should. Mostly my point is, the people on the religious side of things who seem to be of goodwill and recognizing the rights and personhood and citizenship of people that are not of their religions. I mean, they talk on the one hand like that's what they mean. The problem is they'll turn around and say other things which indicate the opposite, and that there is the issue that I think that liberal Christians need to work on, because that's their side of the issue. On the other side, maybe we should stop blurting out things about people that believe in gods being dumb quite so much. But
nope. As a slight correction, though, the issue with the Ten Commandments being on a courthouse lawn has absolutely nothing to do with who it offends, and offense is not an issue or a concern.
You're right.
It's simply a matter of separation of church and state, and I think that some of the things that are in Barack's speech also go to the issue of the separation of church and state. Whereas there's supposed to be no religious test for a candidate's qualification for office, yet there is. It's an implied test that there's no way we could ever stop it. There's no way we could hope to stop it, and I'm not even sure we should. I mean, I like the fact that you can know a lot about the people that you're voting for, including what their beliefs are.
There's a difference, of course, between an official test written into law and the mere fact that people of one religion are probably going to vote for other people of the same religion. But I think part of the reason that is the case is that there's still this language being used that suggests, religious people suggesting to one another that should be the standard by which they decide. That's the kind of thing that Wallace is saying and that Obama is saying.
Yeah, there's a reason that it's going to be extremely difficult for any atheist ever to become president, and that's because there actually is an implied religious test for office, and that is that you have to appeal to the majority. And there's a significant chunk of the majority who simply would not accept or trust anybody who doesn't believe in a God.
Yeah.
And there's just no way around that until we change the minds of everyone, which isn't going to happen in my life.
That's got to start somewhere, and that's what my talk was about.
Yeah.
So let's, we have another call?
Sure. We've got Stan. How you doing?
Hi.
Hi, Stan.
An interesting topic you're talking about today. I think it spans a broad range of things to talk about, but the fact that Obama is pandering to a huge audience for whatever gains, probably to include people on all sides, atheists versus secular people and people of religious world. But it seems like the government, to me, is pretty tolerant of all religions. Just Christianity has the most money, and so they got the most power. And you guys don't offer anything in the way of afterlife and that kind of thing. So
The issue
not a
isn't
whole
so
lot of
much-
money pouring into the atheist thing, probably for that reason.
I don't know. The richest guy in the United States, maybe the world, is an atheist. But the issue isn't so much whether or not the government's tolerant of religions. The idea is that the government shouldn't be concerned about religions at all. One of the things is not whether or not the government's tolerating religions, but whether or not it's showing preference to some religions and some types of religions. And
Well, they're probably showing preference to the money, is my point, because where the money is where they're going to go, and that's where Obama's going. He's going after the money, and if he gets a few other votes from secular world too,
Well, that's fine, But my point is, in the speech that Obama made in front of a largely religious audience, I assume, given the issue that the conference was about, he says things to that audience like, "Faith doesn't mean you don't have doubts," which is a thing that I think that's a healthy attitude for religious believers to have. That if they're gonna believe in the invisible man in the sky, at least they should honestly recognize that they really don't have any knowledge of any such thing, right? That it's just a belief. And then he says, I don't believe that religious people have a monopoly on morality. Very healthy thing, in my opinion, for a religious person to say, as opposed to, the rules of how to behave, of right and wrong, were dictated by my God, and anybody who doesn't follow them is a sinner and deserves to be tortured forever, right? Those are perfectly reasonable things to say. I don't know why he felt that it was necessary to say these other things about how, to say his thing about, just a minute, to say his thing about how people need to come to Christ, right? To say that the way he did, as if he was talking about everybody. He didn't need to do that. Simple little change that, to make it clear, he's talking about people who are so inclined, right? That people that are interested in that religion want to do that. He could have said it that way. I don't see how he would have alienated the audience of religious people that were listening to him. And I wouldn't be sitting here going, geez, why do you have to, why do you, on the one hand, make this big point about how you're trying to be all even-handed and treat your fellow believers and people outside your religion equally, and then say stuff like that? Or this thing about how absolutely essential it was for Abraham Lincoln to invoke the G word when he was making his speech. That's not necessary. I don't think those are things he had to say, even for the money. I think he's just not thinking.
Or he's thinking way ahead of the game too. If he's going for the presidency, he's going to pander to everybody, right across the board.
Except he's not. The way to pander to everybody would be to say the kinds of things that he said, but take out the specific.
With Muslims, he touched base with you guys. He's got everybody talking about him, and that's what he needs. He needs PR.
I'm not talking about him in a positive way. You understand?
Still, people are talking about him.
It seems to me, it would be so simple to
create a lot of controversy early in the campaign.
Can I speak, caller? Can you tell that I'm talking?
Maybe not. But
hang on a second. It would be so simple for him to make minor changes to this speech, to erase the implication woven into it that Christianity is the be-all and end-all correct position to have on everything. I mean, he does such a great job of going halfway. And I don't see how he'd alienate any of his Christian listeners.
He would.
You think so?
I'm guarantee it.
Well,
he's trying to appeal to moderates.
Maybe that's it. I'm still hoping we'll get a liberal Christian calling us so I can ask them that.
Maybe we do.
I believe in God, but I don't believe in churchanity. I have the Bible Banquet show on Mondays.
Right.
Tomorrow 4.
What is that show?
It's my own Bible study. I believe in God, but I don't believe the churches of this world have anything to do with God and what's going on in this planet.
So why do you believe in God?
Well, for my own personal reasons and biases, and the way I've learned about things. for all my life experiences and what I read in the Bible, which I know you guys, wouldn't really be interested in because you don't believe that there is a God to inspire that. So
well, I'm definitely interested in it.
That's where I get my evidence from, and so
right.
That's why I believe in God through the Bible and through my own personal experience and biases in this world. Same like you guys.
Now that I know that I'm talking to a liberal Christian, that's I asked folks like you to call in. What is your opinion of atheists being involved in social issues in the political process? Do you have any problem with that?
No. I mean, you guys are the barometer of the world. If everyone was treated fairly, you guys would be the ones who would know about it because you sense these things when there's religious process involved. And so when you go about your life and some roadblock or whatever comes up, and it has to do with religion, whether it's political place and a voice or whatever, if they just judged how you guys were being treated, they'd know everybody was being treated fairly, right?
So you don't need, for you personally, it sounds like you don't need a political candidate to make a big point about how belief in your God is essential in order to be a good person, right? You don't need to hear that from a political candidate in order to support them.
Yeah, but I'm apolitical. I have the hands off of the whole thing. I don't want to have anything to do with the political world myself.
All right, well.
Darn,
because we could use more liberal Christians like you in the process.
Well, we're all still out there trying to get an equal shake for everybody, and that's what it seems that you guys want, is just to have a fair shake at everything like everyone else.
Yeah.
And you would be best to judge that. I truly believe that. Yeah. And if you guys were being treated okay, I think the world could say, well, if there's no religious bias going on or persecution or favoritism of any sort. But that's where the money comes in, and there's a lot of money in the Christian world, and you guys just don't collect a lot of money for yourself, so that's why I think your voice is unheard.
We certainly can't compete with the pockets of like the Catholic Church and the Baptists for sure.
And we're not in it for the money. I mean, so I hardly see how that has anything to do with it.
I think basically, what we're seeing, and we're talking about opinions about why or why not somebody might appeal to a particular group. And I think that part of it is that he's sincere in his beliefs and trying to be as honest as he can be. And out of knowing that he had atheist parents and knowing that he's fairly liberal.
And is he not Muslim?
No, he's a Christian.
You sure? 'Cause
yeah, I mentioned at the start of the show. Stan? I mentioned at the start of the show that when I did my research, I found this crazy document circulating through the internet, written by right-wing wackos who are trying to attack Barack Obama as some kind of stealth Muslim, and he's not.
Oh, he isn't Muslim at all?
No.
I don't know where I got that from.
Here's the info.
Well, one way you got it is because CNN has been replacing his name with Osama on occasion, too.
Here's the info. You might find this interesting, Stan. Barack Obama's mother was an atheist.
Yeah, I heard that.
His father was a Muslim. They separated when Barack was just a child, and according to Barack, his father became an atheist later in life. His mother then remarried to another Muslim, and for a very short time I think it was Indonesia they were living at the time, as a very young child, for a very short time, Barack attended a Muslim school. And that's it. That's the entire story. He describes himself as an atheist until like his 20s, when he joined a Christian church in like Chicago or something.
I see.
That's it.
Well, that explains a lot, because I thought he may be pandering to both Muslim and Christian people, and possibly be the first Muslim president, which I thought would be a long shot, but still at least interesting against Hillary Clinton. But it turns out that he's Christian also, and but he is a good speaker and he's a good politician, and so he seems to be getting a lot of PR out of it either way. But I thank you for your show. You guys talk a lot about religion.
Before you go, Stan, I had another kind of side question, because this is something that Jeff and I have actually been discussing off and on. Now, your belief in God is based on your own personal experience and the Bible. Mm-hmm. Why would you need to say "and the Bible"? Wouldn't your own personal experience just be enough? Because one of my problems with, for example, and I'll let you answer, one of my problems with liberal Christians, and even some moderates, is that they're still appealing to the same book that the fundamentalists use. And the fundamentalists get to use it better, because a book is a piece of literature, it's words. And the more accurately you adhere to the words, the stronger your case is. So the fundamentalists tend to have a stronger case if you're going to cite a book. So, I mean, wouldn't your own personal experience trump and make the Bible completely unnecessary?
No, because people's personal experience can have all kinds of flukes and hallucinations and all kinds of strange things happen to them. So you can't always trust your own judgment there.
So can a book.
Yeah. I mean, there's no I mean, we know, I mean, this isn't even, breaking news. We know that the Bible has been modified, corrupted, changed, altered. We don't know who any of the original authors are, or who very few of the original authors are. We don't have any original copies. So when you're talking about how your own personal experience might be, I don't know,
enmeshed with
delusional or everything else, you're relying on a book that you know nothing about. I mean, you can read it and you can glean information from it, but you know nothing of its origins.
But you can research it, and
yes?
if you research it, everything that you find as far as places and things and history all works out perfectly. In fact, they get a lot of their history from the Bible as a cornerstone of history. So,
and as we've pointed out before, Spider-Man takes place in New York, and New York's a real place. That doesn't make Spider-Man a real person.
Okay, I'll grant you that.
Any
whole part of the real
any
thing
book
is up to you. It's whether you believe what
I
in
understand
there or
it's
not.
up to me.
And so
I understand it's up to me. All I'm saying is that, let's say you're going to tell a story about a time and a place. You're going to use real places. You're going to use real events. But the thing is, when we go to investigate the Bible, not only do we have this problem about not knowing who the authors are of most of it and not having original copies, we find that the Bible is contradictory to itself in places, contradictory to science in other places, and incorrect in its some of its historical findings. For example, early on in the Gospels, when they're talking about the census that was taken, or Herod killing all of the children under 2, that just didn't happen. I mean, the Bible's the only place that's even talked about, and that's something that would have been mentioned by historians outside the Bible.
Not necessarily, and there's been a lot of changes, and look at the library that was, and the books that have been burned over the ages, the libraries in Alexander that went up in flames. There's been a lot of stuff lost, so secular history isn't always going to record everything, and so, but that doesn't mean that
you're saying what you're saying is that because there's a possibility that there might have been extra biblical evidence in the Library of Alexandria, that's enough. But you don't have any. You don't know that evidence even exists.
I'm not saying that that's going to satisfy everyone. But
why should it satisfy anybody?
Well,
I mean, you could say that there's extra biblical evidence buried under the Sahara that we just haven't found yet. That shouldn't be good enough for anybody.
Well, but everyone's personal experience and their whole when they read the Bible and they gather information from it as a historical record, and you look at these things. A lot of it happened. What happened there with Herod is, of course, symbolic of a whole thing that happened with Moses, the children killed. So they was trying to picture that. And
so it's metaphor and not history.
Secular record of it doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean the first time that type happened in Egypt when those children were slaughtered, there may not be a secular record for that either.
Right, so it's metaphor and not history.
So, but we can't say for sure that story is not true because there's no other secular record. Sometimes there is a mesh where there's secular record, and it all seems to work out.
But you want to be very, very careful about assuming that something is historically accurate when there isn't independent corroborating information. or even when there's just a few points that can be corroborated, like the story of the Trojan War was believed to be entirely mythological for a long time until they dug up the city of Troy. Well, just because the book describing the Trojan War references a city called Troy that we find out later actually existed, doesn't mean that therefore Zeus and Hera and Apollo and Ares are all real. Just because you've got a couple of points of pardon.
There's been lots of historical gods and stories that go along with gods that can of other mythology and that, of course.
Right now, and that ties into something you said a minute ago, where you said you can't prove that those stories didn't happen. Well, you can't prove that the stories of other religions didn't happen, and yet.
Right.
So why would you call you're not a churchian, but you rely on the Bible and use that view of God? Why not the Quran? Why not any other scriptural text of any other religion?
Well, I've not studied the Quran in depth, but I've studied the Bible in depth.
So you're accepting the first one that you've studied?
Well, I'm looking at it at the main meat of everything, and whatever intersects with it, I'll be glad to look at, and that's where I come to look at the Quran. But that's only because of my study of the Bible that it led me there. But so I am concentrating on that because it's the only thing that I see in the whole world that seems to point to that, and where I can get my information about that, about God. And that's why I look to those things.
Okay, Stan, but we've been trying to find out what it is, what the criteria is that you're using to justify, taking that particular book of ancient stories that references some places that we know actually existed and has some corroborating evidence for some of its non-supernatural claims, and saying that one's true when there are all kinds of other books in the world that are the same, that make some verifiable claims about some non-supernatural things, and yet but we reject those. We reject the idea of the Greek gods. Why reject that and embrace Christianity and embrace the Bible? And the only justification you've given us is you picked the Bible first and you're going with it.
And now everything else will be
which is
judged.
fine. If that's your criteria, fine. But would you mind saying that's what your criteria is?
Well, I'm not saying that there is a criteria for going out and picking your religion. I guess what I'm saying is my own personal way I grew up in this world and my experience, and what brought me to the point of looking in the Bible in the first place is why I choose and believe in God and the God of the Bible. And, that's because of just the way things worked out in the world for me.
Okay.
And so it's this personal experience.
So, right.
Setting
and
aside,
you have your own personal experience, too, why you don't believe in God. And that's why, because of your personal experiences along the way.
No.
But we're no.
My lack of belief in God is not because of some esoteric experience. I was a Christian for 25 years, and my lack of belief is due to direct study and an investigation to find evidence to support and come up with any good reason to believe.
And here we are. You studied the same book I did, and I studied, but the different ways that we grew, I guess, in this world.
The difference is that I studied more than that book.
And on top of that, Stan, we do have standards of evidence, right? Rational, hard-nosed, skeptical standards of evidence that we use.
Your evidence is no more evidence than my evidence.
Oh, yes, it is.
I'm afraid so.
Well,
now you may reject our stand. If you reject,
go by the argument that you can't prove something that.
Stan, hang on. Okay, hang on. Now, if you reject the skeptical, hard-nosed, rational standards of evidence that we apply when we decide what to believe and what not to believe, if you reject those standards, then it's no surprise at all to hear you saying that our evidence is the same as yours, right? I don't know what to do about that except, urge you to maybe, take the whole thing a little more seriously, to where
Sorry.
The dog's mad at us now.
No.
If you took the whole thing more seriously, you would embrace a more serious standard instead of just picking up the Bible because you were raised and your life experiences led you to it. Okay, we're going to have to let you go, Stan.
Okay. Well, thank you
Thanks,
for your
Stan.
call.
Bye-bye.
and talking
Good luck
to
with
me.
your dog.
Bye-bye.
Oh, that was... Poor Stan.
Yeah, it's well. On the one hand, it depends on what you're talking about. When he's saying that your evidence is the same as mine, no, actually it's not. And first of all, that's not the situation. When we're talking about just atheism, atheism is a lack of belief, and basically, the type of claim determines what type of evidence is sufficient to justify belief. And if I set my evidentiary bar about here, and Christianity only comes up to here, then I don't believe it.
Right.
And so I lack that belief. Now, if you're going to as many creationists do, pit the creation myth versus evolutionary science and stack up the evidence for both and completely ignore at what level something actually becomes believable and just weigh the evidence, I don't even know that creationism measures. They don't do any science. They don't provide any evidence. All they do is provide assertions, appeals to the Bible, circular arguments, and then they trot out somebody like Behe who starts talking about complexity and just how it's just so complex that it couldn't have happened by accident. So therefore, some God must have done it. I'm not saying who, but I think it starts with a Jehovah.
Speaking of which, this might be a good moment to mention that Kent Hovind, the creationist lunatic who was recently arrested for tax evasion, has been sentenced to 10 years in prison.
Was his wife sentenced as well?
I don't know. I just know that bit.
Yeah. So I guess Dinosaur Adventureland is going to be, in a really rough state for a while.
Like they really need that one guy to run it. I figure if they pay their taxes on the place,
You might still run it.
then maybe they'll still run it. But that would mean admitting that he had done something wrong. So,
Well, at least it means that
as far as I
we
know,
won't
he's
have
still
any,
not admitting that he had done anything wrong.
I mean, at least it means we won't have any new lectures from Hovind for the. Well, I guess it doesn't mean that either.
He can lecture from prison.
Trotting a camera in there and having him. And this is just going to be 10 years of good quality study time that God has provided him with, so that he can come out with more ammo against those evil evolutionists.
One last thing about Stan. If maybe I misinterpreted him, and all he meant when he said that we both got the same evidence is that he was basing his decision on the Bible and you were basing your decision on the Bible. If that's all he meant, then I just want to point out
He's still wrong.
You're still wrong because it matters how you evaluate stuff and how you decide whether something constitutes evidence in the first place. And if your only reason, then the only reason he was able to give us for why he picked the Bible was, well, because his life experiences led him there. That's a pretty low standard for deciding what's going to be, what's going to count as valid evidence in the first place.
Yeah, I made the point that it wasn't just the Bible that I depended upon. Right. I was a Christian who was hoping, to justify my faith and come up with good reasons to strengthen the arguments that I made against people like myself now, and become a minister, a preacher. And it was through study and not just study of the Bible that just didn't happen. I started finding things and investigating things, and I'm a huge junkie for information about early Christianity, the first couple centuries, the formation of the biblical canon, things that went on in the early church, how little we actually know about things, because the average Christian never bothers to learn any of it. They go to church because that's where they were raised. Their life experience trained them to be that way. They go to the Bible and they trust it because mom trusted it and grandma trusted it and all their neighbors trust it, and it just seems so darn foolish not to trust it because everybody around you, this 85% majority or whatever, does.
But that's called indoctrination.
Yeah.
Right? It is no surprise that the vast majority, studies have shown, the vast majority of people in any particular religion are there because they were raised in it. Yeah. And that's not proof of anything. That's just, not a big surprise. In fact, it is way more persuasive, to hear from someone raised to believe A, who during their life experiences, assuming that they're rationally evaluating evidence. If their life experiences tell them, wow, that thing you were raised to believe, in fact, probably isn't true, and they accept that, that's way more persuasive. Because that means they overcame something. They overcame the indoctrination. The weight of evidence had to be that much.
Yeah, people who call into the show who've seen it, and yeah, there's some people who realize that, okay, I was raised a Christian and I was a Southern Baptist and all this other stuff, and eventually I became an atheist. There's some people who have the idea that I just shrugged all this stuff off. Well, that isn't true. I mean, it took years, and there went through a lot of different stages. I mean, if you have this belief that you have an eternal soul, and that after you die, it's going to continue, and it's either going to go to a really nice place or it's going to go to a really crappy place where it's going to be tortured forever. You don't just toss that belief away on a whim. There had to be really good arguments. There had to be good reasons, not just faith.
Yeah.
And there were plenty of things that, in addition to this argument of free will comes up, and I'm not talking about free will in the way that Dennis and I would like to probably debate it for an hour or so someday.
That's twice you've referenced poor Dennis, who was sitting out there in the audience.
We
Dennis, who
love
is
Dennis.
the co-host of the Nonprofits audio show, is here in the studio with us
He's
today.
sitting out in the studio.
In case you were wondering where he is, right now, he's in the studio.
But there's an issue of why won't God just show up, demonstrate himself in an overt way to everybody at the same time.
Right.
Show the whole world that he actually exists.
Right.
And the only explanation that I ever hear from Christians is, well, God's got to kind of remain hidden so that there's faith. You got to have some reason for faith. Well, first of all, why? Why is faith a good thing and why is faith a requirement? What you really believe is that a God created us, gave us a brain, put us in a world where logic, evidence, and reason tell us everything we need to know about all of reality except this one thing. And so basically it's like you've trained a dog to pee on a set of newspapers, and you gradually move the newspapers out to the garage. And then one day you remove the newspapers and the dog doesn't know where to pee. Now, you've trained him for one set of expectations, and then you're going to beat him with those newspapers when you pull those expectations out from underneath him. That's absurd. But it doesn't violate my free will.
Dude.
I'm sorry. I know that went a
That was
roundabout
quite an
way.
analogy.
The thing is, if
I
God,
like it, though.
If God actually showed up and let's say God appeared right here, right in between the two of us, proved that he was God, demonstrated that he definitely exists, the question still exists, do I then worship him? Do I serve him? Do I accept him? Do I agree with him? And the answer is maybe. He's got a shitload of questions to answer about all of these different claims that humans have been making about him. Why hasn't he cleared all this stuff up before? Go ahead.
And one last point, and I love making this. The entire assumption that if God showed up, that would deny people's free will to decide whether to believe in him or not is clearly nonsense, because we know, for example, the Earth is round. We've had photographs of it taken from space. Established fact. And yet, there are people in the world who believe that the Earth is flat. They have a website. So it can't be true. No amount of evidence is going to convince the committed non-believer on certain things, even when it's absolute like that. Now, that's why standards of evidence are important. Because the reason we can sit here and laugh at the flat earthers is because we know that they are rejecting valid evidence. Atheists get accused all the time of being people who won't believe no matter what. But that's not true. We won't believe no matter what evidence Christians have shown us, because none of the evidence Christians have shown us has constituted good evidence, because we have high standards.
Let's go on and we'll take another call real quick. As a reminder, we'll be going to Threadgill's after the show. It's on Riverside near, they'll put the information up on the screen. The show's over at 6 o'clock in about 15 minutes. We'll be there about 6:30 to 6:45. See, I faked him out because they know I'm going to forget, so they weren't expecting me to mention it all. Is this Hector?
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
How you doing?
Hi, Hector.
I'm doing fine. I had seen your show before, and I've always wanted to call. I'm a 49-year-old gay man, and I grew up Catholic in South Texas, and always, wondering and questioning my faith. It didn't always make sense to me, and so just like the gentleman in the orange shirt said, that you have to really, really study, and not just the Bible, but study other books, other ideas, other philosophies. And so even the idea of the spirit is something that I'm really doubting, that there is such a thing as a spirit. You mentioned a while ago, does the spirit get punished forever? Does it get rewarded in heaven? And I really don't think it exists at all. I think it's just something that I think in a way I thought that everlasting life was something that was, in other words, that man has a fear of death, that's it. In other words, they want to say, well, I'm going to live forever, or I'm going to live after death. I think that's wishful thinking on the part of the people who think that there's an afterlife. And another thing that I wanted to really mention is the issue of homosexuality. I think this is the major issue that made me question even the existence of a God. Because people are always saying, well, look at the Bible. The Bible says it's wrong, it's evil, you're a sinner. And, it really affects you growing up and knowing who you are and knowing that you didn't choose it. That's just who you are. And feeling guilty because, your religion tells you that you're wrong or you're a sinner.
Right.
So I think look what the Catholic Church has gone through, in these last, I don't know how many years, where all these incidents of, the offensive, the pedophile priests.
Right.
And how, most of course, they're all homosexual, and yet, like my father wanted to be a priest, but he couldn't because he had a family. And so, they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot and not allowing certain people to be their
Right.
pastors or their leaders. But, I'm at the verge of saying that, yes, I am an atheist, but I'm still having a few issues that are out there, especially the idea of spirit, spirituality. But I really I enjoy listening to you guys. I think, like you said, it does take a lot of study. And growing up, I read a book called Myths of the Bible. And that book really impacted me deeply, and it really made me question, whether the Bible was true or not. And I've come to the conclusion that it's not. Just as you were saying a while ago, that it's, things were left out or things were, omitted for some reason and, edited, whatever.
Yeah, there's all these changes. I mean, I've been reading a couple of books by Bart Ehrman over the last few months where he mentions that there's 35,000 different variations.
Right.
Some of them are incredibly minor, a typo, whatever. The bigger question to me, and I enjoy that. I like looking at the canonization process for the Bible. I like looking at other versions of Christianity which were prevalent in the 1st, 2nd century. All of these things. And the fact that we have no idea of knowing what the original said, all of that means that the book you hold in your hand is completely unreliable. Has to be, by definition. The bigger question is, why would a book ever be considered a good source of information if, in fact, there is a God who has an important message for everybody? Why would he transmit it through a book in languages that he presumably knows will be dead, in a form that he knows will be altered and changed, in a form that he knows could not possibly be convincing? Because anybody can write anything. And for the same reason that Joe Blow accepts the Bible and rejects the Quran, somebody else accepts the Quran and rejects the Bible. And a God, anything that would remotely qualify as a God, would understand all of this from the beginning. And there's no way he would ever transmit an important message that he expected all of humanity to receive through a book. That's asinine. What we're doing is overlaying our human failings and our limitations onto a God and still calling it a God. Guess what?
Right.
If you give God those limitations, he doesn't qualify anymore, at least not under any definition that's worthwhile. I mean, if you want to call this cup of water a God, great. Okay, it exists. I believe it exists. I don't believe it can do anything. and I'm certainly don't think that it inspired a book. I'm sure there's a couple glasses of vodka that might have inspired the book. But.
And those are spirits.
As a younger man, one of the questions that I had was, if there is a God, why are there so many different religions? That was something that really, really perplexed me. And, after reading more and more and coming to the conclusion is that, no, there isn't. There is no God. There is no supernatural being, that's going to judge you for your behavior and whether you follow certain rules that some people decided were, Did you guys ever see the movie History of the World? Where Moses is coming down with 3 tablets.
Yeah.
Each tablet has 5 commandments, and he drops one of them. He's about to say, God has given you these 10 commandments, just 10. So anyway,
Hector, before you go,
yes,
you were saying you still had questions about the whole question of the soul.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the soul or spirituality?
Well, I don't believe in them, but I was going to recommend an essay by Isaac Asimov, the science fiction writer. I don't know if you can find this on the internet, but it is in a collection of stories. If you search for the title, you might be able to find the book that it's in. Okay. The essay is called "The Subtlest Difference," and the author is Isaac Asimov. And he examines this whole question of souls, traces the etymology of the word back to root words that mean things like breath or blood, and it pretty much exposes how the idea of some kind of ghostly thing inhabiting your body that goes away to a magical land after you die is an idea that developed over time from actual physical things that people could see.
Right. The nuns that taught us at Catholic school, they used to tell us that our souls were like a blank slate, and that every time we committed a sin, it would get darker and darker and darker, and that it would take a pretty powerful eraser to get rid of all those sins,
I bet Jesus was that eraser, wasn't he?
Pardon me?
I bet Jesus was that eraser, wasn't he?
Jesus, salvation, the Savior, yeah.
And plenary indulgences and stuff like that,
And it was really very, very sadistic, and it was very fearful. I mean, I grew up terrified of my own thoughts, terrified of even, disagreeing and knowing deep down what I felt, and all because of this religion, this overpowering force in my life,
let me just make this one quick point. I know that there's a Protestant, probably a Southern Baptist, sitting at home right now saying, "See, I told you Catholicism was evil and not really Christian. I never felt tortured and threatened and fearful when I was growing up. I had a warm, healthy, loving relationship." No, please stop. Don't. Just think about what you're thinking for a second.
Right. We're not criticizing just Catholicism.
Yeah, it was actually it was horrifying. I mean, to the point where it could even affect your mental health.
Yeah.
Because deep down you know what you think, you know who you are, and yet they're telling you you're a sinner.
Yeah.
That you're an abomination and all this, and I doubt it. I doubt it because,
and that doesn't even just apply.
Pardon me?
That doesn't even just apply to gay men. It's not even this issue. Within Christianity, there's this idea that we are all worthless sinners in need of salvation from birth, from the original sin. It's probably expanded and much more difficult for a gay man. I can't possibly imagine to have who you are, what you feel, what is normal for you to be labeled as evil and sinful. I mean, that's just got to be terrifying.
I'm sure a lot of Christians will accuse you of, if you decide to make that step and say that you're an atheist, they'll accuse you of embracing atheism because, well, you want to commit sin and the religion says that you're not allowed to do that, so you're rejecting it to free yourself up to do whatever horrible, evil sins you want to do. And I think the reason why that accusation is so common is a lot of people that wake up from religion and decide that it's all bunk do it because they notice there's all these freaking stupid sins where nobody's getting hurt. There's nothing actually wrong on some, ethical level with what it is they're doing. In my case, it was fantasy role-playing games that fundamentalists were attacking, and I'm going, the only reason why they're accusing fantasy role-playing games of being evil is because of their religion? Well, their religion is full of it then. It wasn't so I could go off and be an evil fantasy role-playing gamer.
Wow.
Right.
Even though that is exactly what I've become. I'm proud of it.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much for listening, and I'll keep watching your show.
Hey, you're welcome to come down and join us for dinner. I've got a pimp dinner one more time, too, so I'll invite you as well, Hector. Any atheist or atheist-friendly people are welcome to come to any of our events, including dinner after the show, where we'll be going to Threadgill's on Riverside. We'll be down there about 6:30. You come down, have a meal, get to know some of the people who do a lot of the work behind the scenes, as well as some of the other ACA members. Thanks a lot for calling, Hector. We appreciate it. Call back anytime. We've got about 4 minutes left. Let's try and get another call in. Is it Saul?
Hello, yes. My name's Saul. Thanks for having the show, guys. I've been watching for years.
Thanks.
And I while I have called myself an atheist in the past, I don't really label myself now, but, like I said, I do like to see shows like yours on the air. But I have a bit of a quandary about one thing, and that is when it comes to shows, or not shows, but when it comes to, I guess, discussion of religion and discussion of literal versus analytical versus faith. I look at books as poetry. I guess I look at the text as the holy text as poetry, and to me, the way, for example, some radical Islamists have taken the Quran, to me, is as ridiculous, or it's radical Christians, or radical Jews, or radical Hindus, or radical Buddhists, whatever. It's as ridiculous as if somebody took like Percy Shelley's work and ran off and started worshiping Percy Shelley or Rumi or somebody,
Right.
And started killing people and setting up governments in their name. So that's kind of my take on it. I mean, it's more of an art appreciation. I think.
Except that Shelley never says, "I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt have no other gods before." I mean, there's no impetus within Shelley's work to inspire direct worship of him.
There's maybe no literal, but I mean, you have the comparison to Prometheus and stuff. So I mean, there's definitely, I don't know, some kind of divine, even if it's on a metaphorical level. And I think that's the difference between the poets and maybe some of the so-called prophets, is that you have these moral codes sometimes, I guess, that are instilled in them, on top of the poetry.
Saul, can I ask then, are you suggesting that the Bible was originally written intended to just be poetry? Is that what you're
I would say
suggesting?
that there are segments and parts that certainly
sure.
are.
The Psalms.
Well, I mean, like Solomon, for example, as an author, if he indeed was credited with was the author of like 4 books of the Old Testament, seems to be writing from a perspective that is hundreds or thousands of years ahead of his time compared to just about everything else. You look at Proverbs, you look at the Song of Solomon, you look at Ecclesiastes and stuff that's very philosophical, very poetic, very so I don't. Yeah. I don't know. I honestly don't know why all these extra extraneous things are included in these holy books sometimes. I wonder if it's an interpretation, or I wonder if it's just, some people are better writers than others. So.
Mark Twain actually has commented on that as well, and I'm not going to get the quote exactly right, but he's talking about how the Bible contains, beautiful poetry and inspiring words and upwards of 1,000 lies.
Right.
Which just gets in my last Bible dig of the day. But thanks a lot for calling, Saul. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
And thanks for watching the show.
Bye.
We are about out of time. We're going to remind everybody, all the ACA members in Austin, past, present, and future, you're welcome to come to the 10th anniversary celebration, February 11th of Entoundle Soul. There's information up on the website. Anybody who didn't get through today or didn't want to get through today can email tv@atheist-community.org with any questions, concerns, criticisms. Thanks, Jeff, for coming down.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks to Dennis and all the folks in the studio audience. And there's the crew list up there, which you can now see on Google Video, along with the podcast we've got. So things are moving along. We're looking forward to a great year. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.